My name is Richard F. Collman.
And what years were you here at YDS?
I was here 1965 through 1967. I took an intern year, 67 to 68, came back and graduated in 1969.
What did you find most unexpected about YDS when you got here?
I think the most unexpected thing I found was the wide and wonderful ecumenical nature of the place. I was cohabitating with all kinds of denominations, and it was a widespread, and I was surprised by that. I was also surprised by the libraries. One could do exhaustive research. If not at the Divinity School, you could just go down to Sterling Library and finish it up.
Why did you pick YDS for grad school?
I picked YDS for grad school primarily because my mentor in ministry had been a graduate here, and he suggested it to me when I was in college. And like many students of my generation in the United Methodist Church, I was a graduate of Wesley Foundation. It was my religious fraternity at the university I was at.
Okay. How many women were here when you became a student?
I seem to remember approximately maybe 10 or 15. I think there were more than that in Porter Hall. There may have been 20. It was certainly a minority. Mm-hmm. It was a very male campus back then.
Yeah, so you experienced it as a male-dominated.
Oh, absolutely. I remember chapel choir was always a male choir.
Mm-hmm. Were there women role models, faculty or staff here for the women, do you think?
Not that I really remember. One exception to that would be our fieldwork instructor, Portia Bowers. We reflected weekly with her on the nature of our ministry, whatever we were doing as student workers, interns, or part-time. And she was a fairly good role model on survival in parish ministry, I felt. I don't really recall any other female instructors, though.
What is a vivid memory you have of being here? What are some of your fondest memories being here?
Taking some of the coursework. Paul Holmer is expert on Kierkegaard. He taught a course on John Wesley. I'm Methodist by birth and preference. It was wonderful. Don Salyers and Paul Holmer taught a course on feelings, passions, and emotions, the affective life, a beginning exploration of spirituality, which is, of course, now dominant 50 years later. We weren't studying how to pray. We were studying how to protest. It was the end of the Vietnam War. So I remember that. I remember the interdisciplinary nature of this place. I'm a musician. I'm a keyboard musician. I was allowed to go downtown and take classes at the music school and continue pipe organ study and practice in Marquand Chapel and try and synthesize those two things as best I could because the Institute for Sacred Music did not exist here in 1969. It came in the early 70s. And there was a wonderful latitude about being able to explore and beyond just the core courses we had to have in biblical studies and other things, history and so on.
In what ways do you think your time here shaped your ministry or shaped focuses you had in your ministry?
Oddly enough, in the late 60s, I don't think more than a fourth of our class went into parish ministry. Some of them were professional protesters, some of them were in urban housing. They've retired from that now. But it helped, it still prepared me well for parish ministry. I was taught to think more carefully dialectically, to embody paradox and mystery, and hold things in tension without having a simplistic, dualistic answer. I was taught to take research very seriously. I was a history major from college anyway, with minors in music and philosophy. But I've always had this ability to want to research and dig things out, and it was just perpetuated here. I'm actually a minister and a musician, so I've had about 20 years in music ministry in the church and almost 20 years preaching, not at the same time, of course. But I've come to realize music is a pastoral aid, a great source of comfort, and I began really my interest in liturgy and ritual here by doing a special senior project with Don Salyers on the shape of the liturgy by Dom Gregory Dix. After 6 or 8 years in the parish, I went back to the University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana to get a master's degree in pipe organ and liturgical studies. So I'm really, in a sense, you might say, a minister musician or a minister liturgist. One of my great abilities, I think, is to shape liturgy and ritual for the particular group I'm working with, and to integrate diverse things, music and ecumenical traditions into that, morning prayer, evening prayer, organizing it, getting it to work. And I think that began here and was nourished here and then continued to bloom later on. And I can still tap into that and use that when I have to, where I am now. I'm still playing. I'm very active on the keyboard. I'm involved in playing in a Lutheran church part-time where I live. And so it's just fun to be able to resource, for example, something like an Advent service of healing and comfort a week before Christmas when people feel loss. How does one integrate the music into that to help music be a balm for difficult memories, for a time one may need to cry or just sit in silence in a sanctuary? How does one prepare the space for that and honor the grief and yet help people move maybe towards some healing? So that would be an example of how some of my background that started here perhaps has come to roost 50-plus years later in my career.
I like that. That's good. Do you want to share any memories that you have of your time here, any incidents or special occasions?
Well, I remember practicing the organ at the old organ in the front of Marquand Chapel, which I'm glad to see has been restored and not changed significantly. Playing for some weddings here, either receptions and the piano. I particularly remember Roland Bainton's Martin Luther Christmas sermons in the old common room. I remember Bill Coffin's raising money for Bill Coffin's defense fund against the FBI in the country with Harvey Bristol Sherry Hours, Bristol Sherry Cream. Those were tumultuous times, and they. I remember the suicide of one of our students in one of the houses over the angst of the Vietnam War. He was from Minnesota, and that hit the community immensely hard. I will never forget James Gustafson, the professor of Christian ethics, sermon in the chapel where he said, "None of us are responsible for the ultimate destiny of each other." It was a liberating word from a Christian ethicist. And that hit the whole community here hard. So these are among other things that stand out. The camaraderie of the men of Hopkins House, where I lived for 3 years. Certainly unapologetically a very male campus, but there was a lot of bonding going on there to such a degree that came up from Washington, D.C. with my Hopkins House roommate. We roomed together the last year. So a lot of history.
There is. Did you ever play the piano at coffee hour?
I played the piano in the common room quite occasionally. Yes, well, I had a Madras jacket and a long church warden pipe I brought downtown. And I have 2 sketches by Roland Bainton that he made of me unknowingly, and they're over in the RSV room right now. I brought them along. So I played for quite a few things. I remember we always liked to make fun of gospel music, but then we'd all stand around the piano singing 4-part harmony on Bringing in the Sheaves. So we were acknowledging our past, though at the same time perhaps trying to get away from it. It was fun. I played bar piano for, I call it bar piano, love songs for Ed and Ginny Burke's wedding. I'll probably play this year. Tomorrow we have a reception in the 2nd floor common room. I'll probably play for it then.
I look forward to that.
So I remember those things.
Thank you, Richard. Those are some wonderful memories. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do you want to add anything else?
No, except to say that we're very incarnational creatures. Space, time, environment matter a lot. So I was delighted that this campus was preserved and not demolished. And old men cry, so I hope I don't cry. But it was very significant to go into the old refectory today to have lunch and see the old common room. And though things have moved, change is the only constant in life. Marquand Chapel is still here. These are significant incarnational physical spaces that mattered a lot and shaped our background. They shaped who we've married sometimes, life partners. It's very difficult to articulate the ethos of this place and how it has come to roost in our beings, but it's very significant.
It becomes literally physically part of us.
Yeah, I would not be who I am today without this experience by any means.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're
I'll
most
sit here and ramble myself.
welcome.